Today's video, we're taking a second look at our old-timey Pentium 75 computer.
We got 20-minute videos on old technology, computers, laser discs, and some CDs. We got two little dogs licking their balls on the screen, and now it's time for the show.
So, here she is, the old-timey Pentium 75 machine I put together not too long ago. Well, unless I release this video like a year from now or something. But yeah, it wasn't too long ago I put this machine together just to get sort of the flavor of a original like Pentium 66, but using socket 7, something a little bit more accessible from around, 1995-ish. So we've got a nice gold top Pentium 75 in there. You may notice if you watched that video, there's a little addition, which is the 5¼ inch floppy drive, 1.2 megabytes. That wasn't there when I did that video because I had a hard drive there because there wasn't a place to mount a hard drive. But I found a somewhat creative way around that we'll take a look at when I open this thing. So why are we talking about this machine again? This machine that's nestled between the Apple II, which I'll eventually do a video on. I'm debating on how to do that video. And you guys actually know this machine, but I put it in a different case. This is my Pentium 4 Extreme machine. It was my Splinter Cell computer video. If you watched that one, this is that put in a desktop case because I wanted to have a Windows XP machine with the main monitor I use. There's all kind of crap on the chair right now, but anyways, back to the point of this video. So why am I doing another video on my old-timey Pentium machine? I don't know. It's cool, but it kind of, I want to do some experimentation. So we're going to take this machine, we're going to do a couple things. We're going to change the processor. Nothing very radical there at all, though. But we're gonna take it from a Pentium machine to an old-timey AMD K5 machine, just to spice things up a little bit. We're gonna put in a different graphics card. The Mach 64 PCI card in there is okay, but we're gonna try something a little different, which I hope works because I don't know if I even mentioned it when I did the video on this machine. I was having trouble getting certain video cards to work for some reason, and it didn't start doing that until I switched from a Pentium 90. Originally there was a Pentium 90 in this machine. I did a bunch of benchmarks with different PCI video cards, and then I switched it to the Pentium 75, and suddenly like my video, nothing from S3 would work in there. I had an ET6000 video card, PCI wouldn't work. But like the ATI cards for some reason worked, so I don't know. We'll see how that goes. So yeah, we're going to change CPU. We're going to put in a little bit of a different video card, different sound card, although as I'm recording this I'm not quite sure what sound card I'm going to go with. And I think that's, we're going to, another little addition you guys suggested in the original video. So yeah. Join me with this hopefully interesting journey with turning the old-timey Pentium 75 into an old-timey AMD K5 machine. So if you'll remember, I had my hard drive mounted here where this floppy drive is in the prior video. As you see, there's nowhere here to mount a hard drive. So what was my solution? Well, I guess I could have gone with compact flash or something small that I could just kind of rig something and mount it, but no. Instead, I found a way to rig the large IDE drive. I actually found one of those like PCI HD holders, but I think this was for a solid state drive, and I just kind of manhandled and bent it, and then I just screwed this on the bottom part. I'll take this out and show you, but it's not like it's not the most sturdy thing, but it works. It's not going anywhere. It's not like I'm tossing this computer around like a football where it's gonna like break off and stuff. It's just sitting there. So creative solution, right? Oh wow, it's even more janky than I remember doing it. It's just I just have it screwed in through one large screw right there that's not even fully screwed in, but like I said, I'm not tossing this thing around like a football. And then it just kind of sits there, and it does what I need it to do. So, yeah. And another little quick upgrade I did, I upgraded the RAM from 32 megabytes to 64 megabytes. 64 I think is as far as I'm going to go with this thing, seeing as, well, right now it's just DOS only, and more than 64. 32 is more than enough for DOS. 64 is about as high as you want to go, really, for compatibility and things like that. But I don't know. I'm tinkering around the idea of putting Windows 95 on this thing. Maybe not, if not now, then eventually. So a little bit of extra RAM might come in handy. So I just boosted it up to 64 megabytes. Okay, so for the CPU, again, nothing radically different. We're sort of staying at the same speed. All I'm doing, I'm swapping out the Intel, the Pentium 75 for an AMD K5 with a Pentium rating of 75. So it's basically the same speed. So this chip came out, I believe, in '96. This was AMD's first line. The K5 was AMD's kind of first line of chips made in-house themselves. It's quite an advanced chip, but at the time this came out, there were much faster CPUs than 75 megahertz. Now, even though it's rated at the same as the Pentium 75, I believe it's supposed to run a little bit faster, but I don't know how much. I've seen about 2%, probably not a noticeable difference. We'll do some benchmarks and see if there's any noticeable difference, at least in the benchmarks. But it's supposed to be a little bit faster than a Pentium 75, but really, from my research, it's only 1 to 2%, and it's probably slower in the floating point mathematics. So I'm guessing we might get a little bit slower results in something like Quake than we would with the Pentium 75. But I just wanted to go different. YouTuber High Treason tends to like these AMD K5, so I figured I'd check it out. I thought for a while maybe going with a faster speed, maybe a PR90 or a 100, but this popped up for a good price, so I figured it'll give my machine a little bit of personality, so we don't just have like a bland Intel Pentium in there, something a little bit different. So on my original video with this machine, some of you in the comments suggested adding a Voodoo, an original Voodoo 1 card, and yeah, I kind of agree. I had an extra one sitting around, so we're gonna add a Voodoo card just because it seems pretty appropriate. This is the one from Orchard, and this is their Righteous 3D card. One of the cool things about this Voodoo card is I believe it has a mechanical switch. So when you actually switch to a 3DFX game, you'll hear a click come from the card. I'm pretty sure the Orchard one uses. I know I have a Diamond Voodoo 1 card in my other machine, and it doesn't use a mechanical switch, I don't think. So when you switch to a 3DFX game, it just switches to a 3DFX game with Glide. But when you have this card, some of these cards that use the mechanical switch, when you switch to a Glide game, you can hear a click. It doesn't really do anything. It's just a little bit different way to do it, but it's kind of neat. I mean, I don't think I have to talk too much about this. If you're watching this channel, you probably know about Glide and Voodoo cards, and if not, I mean, I did an article on the blog about it, and I've talked about it in, I think, my Pentium-based DOS build, that one of my first videos on this channel. I talk about the original Voodoo card, and there's plenty of videos and information about the original Voodoo, but this will give me some good compatibility. This will let me play some of those early DOS Glide games. If I decide to put Windows on this machine, this will also just give me compatibility with those early Glide games. So for a graphics card, I wanted to go with something fairly different. This is a graphics card from IGS. It's the IGS 1682A. You may have seen it before in some of my videos. I've kind of used it as a testing video card because this thing has just always worked. I've never had an issue with this card, so I just have it sitting in the corner. When I need a PCI video card, I pop it in, and it's always worked just fine. But I wanted to really test this thing out and put it in a rig and see how compatible it is, because it's an interesting card. I'm guessing a lot of you have probably never heard of IGS. Other than this card, I don't have any other cards from them. I've never even seen another IGS card, but I do know they made many graphics cards. I believe they were based out of California. They started up in '93, so the early '90s, and they were doing graphics card stuff, I think, all the way up until 97 they changed their name, and I think about in 2000 they changed it again, and they do something completely different now. They do not make graphics cards anymore, but throughout most of the 90s, IGS was making these graphics cards. But other than that, I don't know much about them or what market they were for. This isn't a 3D accelerator or anything, it's just an SVGA card, but yeah, I'm just curious about its compatibility with DOS. So this might be a 1 megabyte card that can be upgraded to 2 megabytes, or maybe it's a 2 megabyte card that can be upgraded to 4. I'm not sure. This is from 95, so it's still sort of right in the right era for our machine. And this will be interesting. I know when I did some benchmarks, this actually clocked a little bit faster than the ATI Mach 64 and the Mach 32. So yeah, I'm very interested in the compatibility. It really looks like kind of a no-frills card, but we'll see how well it does. And the Voodoo 1 and the Voodoo 2 also use kind of a pass-through system where I have to have a little VGA cable linking the main 2D card to the Voodoo card, and then the Voodoo card to the monitor. It hurts your image quality a little bit, but it's really not all that noticeable. So yeah, that's installed. I had to rearrange things a little bit to make things fit. I had to move the hard drive and janky holder up to this top one, and I moved the I/O connectors down. And then we have the IGS card, Voodoo 1 card, and still got the Sound Blaster, and here's our MIDI card. But I am going to change this sound card. I just don't know what to change it to yet. So I talked a little earlier about sound cards, and this is what was originally in here. This is a Sound Blaster 16 CT1740. One of the earlier Sound Blaster 16 has a real Yamaha OPL chip. IDE controller not being used in this computer. This one's missing that ASP chip. There's like 2 games that use it anyways. Wave table, what do they call that? Wave blaster. But you can add little MIDI boards there. Pretty decent card. The one thing about these earlier ones, though, they tend to be a little noisy, but they do not have the hanging MIDI bug. So I was pretty much just using this for digital voices and FM synth. But the thing is, this computer, as we know, has the MIDI card. So I'm using external MIDI devices. So it really doesn't matter that this lacks the hanging MIDI note bug anyways, because I'm not using it for MIDIs in any way. So I just wanted to kind of maybe take this card out and possibly use it in a different machine that doesn't have a MIDI card in case I need to use, you know, an external. Of course, there's limitations with using the port right there, the joystick port for MIDI on these cards. It only works with, it doesn't work with games that use intelligent mode and blah 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 blah. But you know, it gives me more options if this was in a different machine. So I wanted to replace this. I really had no idea what to replace it with. I really just wanted a card that had decent, good FM synth and compatibility. And so I was originally thinking maybe a Pro Audio Spectrum 16. I have 2 of those cards. Unfortunately, one doesn't seem, I just can't get it working. And the other one is happily in my Socket 5 machine, I think. So I was racking my brain. Also, those Pro Audio Spectrum 16s are kind of expensive, so I can't just go pick another one up all willy-nilly. So I think for right now, I'm just going to go with another Sound Blaster 16. This one uses the Vibra 16S chip. This is the CT2800. Some people give the Vibra cards a bit of shit, but I actually think they're pretty good. It should be a little cleaner sounding than this guy here. It does have the hanging MIDI note bug. Probably the, I think it's called the DSP clicking bug, or DMA clicking bug too, but I'm not worried about the hanging MIDI bug because we're not using it for MIDI, but it has a real OPL FM chip, has pretty much the same connections on here. It should sound a little bit nicer with the digital audio and the, or, you know, digital voices and sound effects, and FM should sound the same, more or less, a little bit cleaner. So for right now, I'm just going to replace it with this guy here. Even though this is a Vibra chip, this also has jumpers. So, okay, so should be an easy swap. So I'm a big fan of case badges, and I mean, obviously this will drive me crazy now if there's an Intel sticker on there when we've got a AMD K5. So I already moved this little badge. This was for Act personal computer. I'll probably keep that. It's a little bent up, but I'll keep it. Maybe there's another case down the line I can put it on if I've got nothing else to put on there. And I'm going to try to carefully remove this, and I'll just put it in my little sticker supply. So maybe I can put some glue on the back of it at some point and apply this to another case where it would be more appropriate. And as far as I know, AMD didn't have any K5 stickers or case badges, so this is the closest thing I could find online, other than making my own, which I'm not going to do. So this is kind of cool, and I'll just put that there. Oh, that's weird. Yeah. Okay, so now on to some benchmarks here, just to compare the IGA graphics card to the Mach 64 GX card that I previously had in there. These tests were done with the Pentium 75 megahertz in there, and the image in the upper right corner, that is with the AGA card running. So we can look at the FPS and the scores, and these cards are virtually identical. Everything is pretty much within the margin of error. Although the IGA card does pull ahead slightly in all of these tests. So I would say it's unnoticeably, maybe marginally faster than the ATI Mach 64 GX card. So 3D Bench, it's 0.2 faster. Again, that's so close. It's really within margin of error. Just how things are a little bit different, it might flip. You never know. That's just too close. PCP Bench, 640 by 480. Again, 0.2 over the ATI. Doom, it's a little bit more noticeable. It's just 2 frames per second over the ATI card. Still not anything big there, just 2 FPS. And then in Quake, it's just 1 FPS faster. And I ran all these benchmarks 3 times and took the average as always. But yeah, it's like I said, the man, why do I keep getting my tongue tied on that? The IGA 1682 seems to be extremely marginally. Is that it's marginally faster than the ATI Mach 64, but I don't think it's really anything you would notice. So let's move on to comparing the CPUs. Alright, now let's compare the CPUs. Both of these CPUs were benchmarked with the IGA 1682 graphics card. Then all I did is benchmark one, pulled the CPU, put in the other, and benchmarked them again. Ran each benchmark 3 times and took the average as always. And the results are kind of like how our results are with the graphics cards. Marginally different, except for, well, at least with the synthetic benchmarks, it's within margin of error more or less. With 3D Bench 1.0C, it's very close. It's like 1 FPS or 1 score point. PCP Bench at 640 by 480, it's 8.7 versus 8.4. With the K5 being marginally slower, again within the margin of error. With 3D Bench, the K5 was marginally faster. Doom, actually, we see the K5 noticeably kind of pulling ahead there by 6 FPS, so that's interesting. And then we have the opposite, which is what we expected with Quake. We have the Intel Pentium 75 pulling ahead of the K5-PR75 by, what is that, 5 FPS. That was expected, though. Quake really does take advantage of the stronger FPU and the Pentium chips. It was really sort of optimized for Pentium. So yeah, I mean, I think, it kind of goes back and forth a little bit, but I think they're roughly even, but it's probably what we expected. The K5 seems to be a little faster in general, unless it's something, obviously, it's optimized for the Pentium or that uses the FPU a lot. Then we see it kind of swing into the Intel Pentium's favor. Of course, I only did 4 benchmarks here, so it's not comprehensive, so keep that in mind, but let's just move on. Here we have the machine posting with the K5 in there. I didn't really talk about the K5 too much earlier when I was going over the CPU, but it really is an interesting CPU. I believe it's actually a RISC-based CPU, and it kind of quickly decodes x86 code. And clock for clock, it is faster than the Pentium the Intel Pentium equivalent. I don't know, they made them up to 200 megahertz. Maybe I wouldn't mind playing around with the faster ones maybe one day. They're kind of interesting CPUs. So another thing that happened with this CPU when I installed it is when I ran CPU ID, if you can see up there, it detected it as running at 91 megahertz, which is interesting. It wasn't running at 91 megahertz as far as I could tell. Of course, I didn't have to change. All I did is swap CPUs, so I didn't change any jumpers for the front side bus. So I probably just something with the BIOS on my motherboard. But when we do look at something like SpeedSys, that seemed to record the appropriate speed of 75 megahertz. So let's take a look at a side-by-side of some of the more interesting benchmarks we did. So this is Doom. On the left we have the K5, and on the right we have the Pentium 75, and this is running on the IGA graphics card. And you can see right away that the AMD K5 is pulling ahead. Now remember, both of these games are perfectly playable on either system. You're not going to have a problem with either of these CPUs. But yeah, the AMD K5 does noticeably pull ahead in these benchmarks. And here we have a side-by-side of Quake running on the AMD K5 and the Pentium 75, and it's basically the opposite of Doom. It's kind of what we expect, or what we would expect with this setup, where we have the Intel Pentium 75 pulling ahead. Now I would call both of these games playable, at least at lower resolution, but the Intel definitely has the advantage in this benchmark. Alright, so let's take a look at this machine with the K5 in it, with the IGA video graphics card, and let's see how it runs and performs, and let's check out its compatibility. Let's start a little bit lighthearted, and actually found this floppy disk, and I was shocked that it worked. And this is a QBasic game that I and a friend of mine created in high school. And yeah, it's very crude. It's in QBasic. I thought this game was lost to time, and I actually found it on a floppy, and it worked. And this machine is kind of similar to the machine we kind of created it on. It's not anywhere near finished. So I put it in, I installed it to the hard drive, and it ran, and I hadn't seen this for years. And yeah, it's ridiculous. We were just trying to make sort of an RPG game in QBasic, and we didn't know, basically no programming skills, still don't have any. But we were just kind of goofing around, and this was an intro we made, and it's just, man, I hadn't seen this for years, and I'm shocked that the floppy wasn't corrupted. There's no sound. I mean, there is sound, but it's speaker beeping, and I didn't capture that. There's the intro to the game. So yeah, when you start out, you start in this city, and none of this is really finished. You could go to like weapon shop and stuff. You could visit the castle. I think you have to progress. There's the king. He sits on his royal toilet. This was a long time ago. I like to think my sense of humor has evolved and matured since then. Yep, and Dylan takes the princess. The evil warlock Dylan kidnaps the princess and takes the king's crown, and you can go back into it, and she's there again. But like I said, this is completely unfinished. There's only like 5 minutes of this game, and then we gave up. But yeah, I think we got to the point where you can leave town, and then that's where the game ends. So when you leave the town, the evil Dylan warlock, he appears. And we even did a little fancy thing where he's kind of like swinging his sword to intimidate you, and then we wanted him to like teleport away, and we didn't know how to do that, so we just have it where like each of his body parts would disappear, because that's the only way we could kind of figure out how to do it, and it's kind of funny. We were like, it's kind of like a poor man's way of doing it, and then we were kind of like, I I kind of like that. He teleports away, and then his head implodes on itself, and that's how he teleports. But that's that's as far as we got with the game. So let's move on to some real DOS games now and check out how they run with the K5 and the IGA card. And as always, I need to point out, I like to stress these systems when I make them. So all these games are running at, high detail settings, generally at higher mid resolutions. Like Duke here is running in SVGA at a higher resolution. Always, if you want to get better performance when you see these games on my systems in these videos, you always have the option of turning down details and lowering the resolution to get better performance. But this is just an example of how these games can push the system and how the systems will run with these games on their higher settings. So I figured you all might want to see some Voodoo glide games working in DOS on this machine with that Orchard Righteous Voodoo 1 card we added, but unfortunately I didn't have any luck. I tried the game Whiplash, but I couldn't find the right patch for it apparently. I can only find the 3DFX packs for the European version, which I thought should work, but I just couldn't get that game to run in glide mode. I tried Extreme Assault, which is a little bit... The requirements for that are a little bit higher than this machine is spec'd, but I got an issue. It failed because it couldn't get a resolution high enough. I think that might have to do with not having enough RAM on my card. Tomb Raider, as you can see here, I did get the glide version to run successfully and load up, but it would freeze, it would lock up about 5 seconds after gameplay started. Now, I'm fairly certain the Voodoo card itself is working because I previously had it in another system and it worked just fine. And I mean, it's been in an anti-static bag in a box since then. It's been a few months, but I mean, unless something failed on that card between now and then, the card itself should work fine. So I'm just not sure what the issue was. I just didn't have any luck getting any of these glide games working on this system.
Welcome to my home. I'll take you on a guided tour.
So even with a complete reinstall, completely different hard drive, I still get that same issue with Tomb Raider. It loads up, the game loads up for 3D effects, it runs for a few seconds, and then it just locks up. So here is our now old-timey K5 machine back in its spot. Bummer, I just could not get the any 3DFX games to work on it. Now, in the past, I probably would have put some more time in it to figure out what was wrong, something like that, but I've got a new job going on. I just do not have the time like I used to do things like that, and I wanted to get this video out. So I couldn't play with that very much. If any of you guys think you might know what the problem is, let me know in the comments. I have a lot more games that actually support the 3DFX card, but they're in boxes. I just didn't have the time to dig them out and experiment with them. I'm pretty sure the card itself, that Voodoo 1 card itself, is fine, and the card looks fine. Like I said, it worked previously, but you know, like I said, I don't have the time to mess around with it too much. But yeah, that's the system. I am pleased with the K5. It seems to run just fine. I also am kind of impressed with that IGA card. Now, I didn't stress it a ton, but it seems to be a fine 2D card. I didn't play, you know, a ton of games, but every game I seemed to throw at it worked fine in DOS, so it seems like a fine 2D card. Not the fastest out there, but you know, it's comparable. So if you come across one, rather than throwing it in the garbage, maybe you want to put it in your retro machine and use it. It's not a bad card at all, and it runs games like Commander Keen 4 just fine, no scrolling errors, where on the ATI Mach 32 and 64, we do have scrolling errors, so something to consider. And yeah, that's about all. So I hope you enjoyed this video of the now K5 machine. Maybe I'll play with some faster K5s in the future. I don't know. We'll see. So you guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the next video. And I also changed the CD drive, if you guys hadn't noticed.